Are you ready for a pixie book? Come on and listen in! With stories full of wonder, it's time now to begin. Hello, children! Are you ready for a story? Oh, fantastic! Perfect timing, storybook! Today's story is called The Little Match Girl. This story is a special one because some people think it's sad, while other people think it's happy. No one can seem to settle it. Once upon a time, a little girl lived with her parents in a small house in the city. It was the coldest New Year's Eve in years. The roof of their home had holes in it that they had stuffed with rags. But still, the icy wind got in. Brrr. Sadly, the little girl and her parents were not only cold, but very hungry, for they hadn't eaten in days. The little girl decided she would go out and sell some matches so she could buy food for her family. She loved them dearly, and seeing them suffer broke her little heart. Her parents didn't want her to go out in the cold, but the little girl was determined. Her mother said, "If you must go, at least wear my slippers to keep your feet warm." They're much too big, but they're better than nothing. The little girl set out into the icy streets with a bundle of matches to sell. New Year's Eve parties were happening in the houses all along the street. Warm candlelight spilled from the windows of the homes, along with smells of delicious food, including her favorite roasted chicken. Yum! She was crossing the street when suddenly a carriage charged by. The horses knocked her backwards into a snowbank, and the slippers fell right off her feet. Before she could get up, a stray dog ran over, snatched the slippers in his mouth, and disappeared down an alley. The little girl was too weak to chase the dog, but she was not going to give up. She wandered shivering through the night, crying, "Matches for sale?" But no one bought any. The snow kept falling and the wind howled. The little girl's feet were completely numb, her fingers aching and her ears stinging from the biting chill. She thought of going home, but when she looked around, the snow was so thick that she was lost. She couldn't call her parents because back then, phones hadn't been invented. She finally collapsed in the corner next to a mansion, huddled up against the brick walls in hope of escaping the wind. She struck a match against the brick and warmed her fingers over the bright flame. Then, the strangest thing happened. Right there before her eyes appeared a huge fireplace with a crackling, joyous fire that warmed her all over. But the match quickly burned out, and she was left once again in the dark and cold. The fireplace was gone. She struck a second match, and this time she could see right through the bricks into an elegant dining room. There was a long table with a crisp white cloth and beautiful dishes piled with every kind of food she could desire. In the middle was a perfectly roasted chicken. The chicken floated towards her, but just as she reached for it, the match went out. In its place was the cold, wet wall. She lit another match, and this time she saw the biggest and most beautiful of holiday trees, sparkling with pure magic and lights. Those lights reached so high into the sky that they became stars. Just as the flame went out, she saw one of the stars fall. This reminded her of her grandmother, who had always told her that falling stars granted wishes. She missed her grandmother terribly, but when she lit another match, her grandmother was right there smiling at her with rosy cheeks, wearing a toasty shawl. "Grandmother, don't go!" the little girl cried as the match went out. Determined to keep her grandmother near, she scraped the whole handful of matches against the bricks. This time, when her grandmother appeared, she gathered the little girl up in her warm, soft arms. Together, they floated up towards the stars, where there was no hunger, cold, or sadness, just love, peace, and joy. The next morning, on New Year's Day, the little girl woke up and was astonished to find herself wrapped in a blanket in front of the fireplace at home. Her parents were sitting nearby in the glow of the crackling fire with steaming cups of coffee. Strangest of all was the smell of delicious roasting chicken. She looked around for her grandmother, but instead saw the lady from next door. She realized her grandmother was just a dream, but this neighbor had found her, carried her home, and shared firewood and food with her family. She still missed her grandmother, but her heart and belly were filled by the neighbor's kindness, kindness that saved her life. The end. So, friends, what do you think? Is this story happy, sad, or both? That's for you to decide. Bye-bye. Did you like this story? So let me know by clicking on the thumbs up. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled in the hills, there lived a shepherd boy. Every day, he'd take the village's sheep up the hill and out into the fields. There, the sheep would roam about and nibble on the green grass. Every so often, a sheep would wander off, and so the boy would climb onto his trusty steed, which was really just a stick, and trot about in search of his lost treasure, that is, his sheep, and finally guide it back to the flock. Otherwise, not much else would happen. Each day went by the same as the day before. One day, the shepherd got to thinking, being a shepherd is so boring. I wish something exciting would happen. Like, what if a wolf came around? I'd have to use my sword, that is, his stick, and chase that mean old wolf away. Suddenly, he got an idea. What if I fooled the villagers into thinking that there was a wolf? They'd all come running. Now that would be a sight to see. Why not? I'll do it. And so the boy cried out, "Wolf! Wolf!" In no time at all, the boy could see the villagers scrambling to find sticks and stones, and they quickly came racing up the hill. "Where's the wolf?" they called out. Sorry, it was just a crow in the bushes. The villagers sighed with relief and returned to the village. Once they were far enough, the boy burst out laughing. That was great! Now that is what I call fun! And so, the boy spent the rest of the afternoon giggling and proud of how he had fooled the entire village. The following day, the boy was counting how many times one of the sheep had been chewing on one mouthful of grass. 152. 153. Boring. Suddenly, he had an idea. Actually, it was the same idea as the day before. Wolf! Wolf! Once again, the villagers ran up the hill. Where is it? Where's the wolf? Well, it was just the wind. The villagers now seemed a bit irritated. But to the boy, it was just a game. The next day, the boy was up to his tricks again. Wolf! Wolf! Huh? But this time, hardly any villagers came running up the hill. Oh, so much for that game. Well, it was fun while it lasted. Later that day, the boy was lying on the ground, looking up and imagining the clouds to be fire-breathing dragons, when suddenly he heard something in the bushes. He sat up and looked around. It must be the breeze. But then he heard a twig snap. Oh, hello? Is anyone there? Another twig snapped. Oh, hello? Then, all at once, the sheep lifted their heads and sniffed the air. Meh. And that, is when the shepherd's heart began to pound. Oh, he slowly stood up and held his stick tightly. And then he saw him. A big, gray wolf. His hungry eyes were glowing. A chill ran down the boy's spine. He used all of his strength to cry out, "Wolf! Wolf! But no one came. Then, as if on cue, all the sheep began to run about. Meh, meh, meh. Now that caught a villager's attention, and she cried out, "Wolf! Wolf!" The villagers started running up the hill, collecting stones. Within moments, a rock landed beside the wolf. Then another, and another. The wolf began growling and howling, "Arr!" until one rock hit him right in the snout. The wolf whimpered with pain and ran off, never to be seen again. The shepherd boy had learned some very important lessons that day, and from then on, he enjoyed the peaceful time he spent with his beloved sheep. The end. Come on now, it's time to go to sleep. He doesn't want to go to sleep. He's so full of stories. He has so much energy. Shh, shh, time to sleep. You too, good night. Shh.
If you love to hear PixieBooks, just subscribe and we'll let you know when there's a new story to tell.
No! Hello, children. It's time for a story. Wait, someone or something is missing. Ah, yes, the storybook. Not there. Not there. Oh, there he is. Hello, storybook. We're ready for a story. The story of the 3 little pigs. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs. These little pigs were brothers, and ever since they could remember, were always competing. Who would be the first to arrive, the fastest to finish? Oh, it didn't matter what it was, the 3 would compete about it. When the time had come for them to leave their parents' house, the first pig said,
"I'm going to build me a brand new house."
The second pig then said,
"Oh yeah? Well, my house will be much nicer than yours."
and as the 2 pigs argued amongst themselves, the 3rd little pig just smiled, and off they went. The first little pig was walking beside a farm when he saw a large stack of hay, and suddenly had an idea. He purchased the hay and rolled it over to a flat spot with a lovely view of the valley. Then he emptied the middle of the haystack to create his living room. He poked holes in the walls for a door and windows and called it home.
Look at me! I'm as fast as a pig can be.
The second little pig was walking along a forest trail when he noticed lots of twigs and leaves on the ground. Suddenly, he had an idea. He gathered as many twigs and leaves as he could, carried them over to a flat spot not far from his brother's hay house, because he too would have a lovely view of the valley. He then mixed all the twigs and leaves with some mud, and in no time at all had built himself
a new home.
Well, at least I'm not left. My twig house is a blast.
The third little pig passed by the hay on the farm and the twigs and leaves in the forest, knowing, well, they weren't the right materials. He would build his house with strong and sturdy bricks. His house wouldn't be far from his two brothers, so that he too could enjoy the lovely view of the valley. As the days passed, his brothers would often come by and snicker and jeer while he was hard at work.
We know who will finish last, said the first little pig. My hay home took only 1 day to build. Oh, yeah, said the second little pig. Well, but your home isn't as tall as my house of twigs.
Well, the third brother gave them no mind. He just continued to build. Finally, after a lot of hard work, the third little pig stood proudly in front of his new home. His two brothers came over for a visit, but this time they just stood there in awe. Suddenly, they heard a chilling howl. Arrgh! The brothers looked out over the valley and could see a huge, menacing wolf coming towards them.
Ah!
Each pig ran into the safety of their homes. The wolf stepped up to the first little pig's hay house. He took one look at it and laughed. A house made of hay? Oh, with a huff and a puff, I'll blow it away. And so he huffed and he puffed and he blew the house down. The first little pig squealed and quickly ran over to the brothers' twig house. But just as the second little pig opened the door, the big wolf arrived. Twigs and mud might be a bit stronger, but a huff and a puff from me, and it's all over. And again, the wolf huffed and puffed and blew the house down. The two little pigs squealed with fear and ran as fast as they could over to their brother's brick house. He quickly let them in and locked the door. The wolf approached, hungrier than before. He huffed and puffed and blew with all his might. But this time, the house stood strong. He tried again, huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing all through the night. Finally, as the sun rose over the valley, the wolf let out one last howl of despair. And walked off exhausted. Later, as the three little pigs stood looking over the piles of fallen hay and twigs, the third little pig held them close.
Well, what matters most is that we are all safe. Say, how about the three of us build your homes together?
The two little pigs squealed with delight. And finally, after a lot of hard work and cooperation, the three little pigs, now three happy neighbors, lived in their well-built homes with a lovely view of the valley, happily ever after. Oh, what a heartwarming story. It's been a pleasure telling it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello. If you like to hear stories, I have just the place for you. PixieBooks. Oh, there's so many stories to find there. So come on over to PixieBooks. Oh, hello, children. Oh, Storybook and I have a classic tale to tell. Are you ready? Oh, wonderful. So are we. The story of Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a rich merchant whose wife fell ill.
As she felt her end drawing near, she called to her beautiful daughter, "Oh, my dearest, always be kind and good, and trust that things will work out. Take this locket and keep it close. It will protect you."
Years passed, and the merchant remarried.
His new bride and her 2 daughters came to live with the merchant and his daughter. The merchant was often away on business and entrusted his daughter's care to his new wife. Little did he know that his new wife and stepdaughters were very mean to his daughter. The stepsisters mocked her, while the stepmother forced her to attend to all their needs from morning till night. They even forced her to sleep on a pile of cinders, which stuck to her hair and clothing, and so they named her Cinderella. Poor Cinderella spent her days laboring away. Late at night, she would secretly take out her beloved mother's locket, which she kept in a secret pocket. She would open it and gaze lovingly at her mother's worn-out portrait and cry herself to sleep. One day, the king's messenger arrived and regally announced, "Hear ye, hear ye! The prince is ready to be wed! All maidens are summoned to a special ball at the castle, where the prince, by the midnight hour, will choose his bride." The 2 stepdaughters cried out with excitement, "Oh, I'm sure he'll choose me to be his bride."
You? The other sister mocked. Only if he's blind, he's sure to pick me.
The stepmother interrupted. "He won't choose either of you if you don't go and prepare yourselves.
Hurry now, there's much to be done. Cinderella, don't just stand there like a stump. Prepare their baths and bring out their new dresses. Move it!"
The sisters barked out orders while their mother oversaw it all, making sure that her daughters were fit for a prince. Finally, they all stood at the doorway ready to leave when Cinderella whispered, "Can I go too, please?"
You? Go to the ball? Oh, we'd be the laughing stock of the kingdom. No, Cinderella, attend to your chores.
And with that, the stepmother slammed the door. Cinderella dropped to her knees and burst out crying. Tears streamed down her dusty cheeks and down onto her ragged dress. One tear made it all the way to her mother's locket. The locket began to shake, buzzing with energy. Startled, Cinderella slowly took it out. The locket glowed brightly. Suddenly, it opened, and swirls of twinkling light danced about the room until finally a smiling old woman wearing a sparkling dress magically appeared.
Oh, hello, Cinderella. I am your guardian angel.
Cinderella was shocked.
But how?
No time to explain. You have a ball to attend. And with a wave of her hands, rainbow sparkles swirled around Cinderella, transforming her appearance from head to toe.
Ooh, not bad. Take a look in the mirror.
Cinderella looked and was amazed, especially by the crystal slippers she now wore.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much.
That's what guardian angels are for.
And now, there's only one little thing. The magic will wear off by the last chime of midnight.
Now, go and have yourself a ball. A short time later, Cinderella arrived at the ball. When the grand doors opened before her, she stood in awe of all the splendor. Everyone immediately caught sight of her radiant beauty, and especially the prince, whose heart skipped a beat. He approached. "It would be such an honor to dance with you." Cinderella blushed, curtsied, and replied, "The honor would be mine." The prince danced with Cinderella all through the night, deeply moved not only by her beautiful appearance, but even more so captivated by the light shining in her eyes. Finally, the music stopped, and the king stood up and called for attention. "The midnight hour is upon us." Cinderella looked at the clock, which began to chime, and gasped. "Son, have you made your choice?" "I have, father," said the prince. He then turned towards Cinderella, shocked to discover that she was gone. He saw her rushing out the door. "Stop!" he cried, and rushed after her. By the time he reached the steps of the castle, she was nowhere to be found. He then noticed something twinkling on the ground. It was her crystal slipper, which had slipped off her foot as she ran off. The next day, the prince set out with a small entourage to find his lost love. He went from door to door, having every maiden try on the crystal slipper. When he arrived at Cinderella's home, he was greeted by the stepmother and her 2 daughters. The first sister shoved her foot forcefully, even banging it into the wall, but as hard as she tried, it was too small. The other sister, realizing that the slipper was too big, tried to secretly stuff it with a silk cloth, but was caught in the act. The prince let out a sigh and walked out the door. However, one of the prince's aides caught sight of a woman clearing cinders out of the fireplace. "You there? It was proclaimed that every maiden is to try on the slipper. Come on!" Cinderella stepped forward shyly and slipped her foot gracefully into the slipper, which fit perfectly. Everyone gasped. The aide called out to the prince, "My lord, we found her!" The prince rushed back into the room and stood before Cinderella, and despite all the dust and grime, recognized the light shining in her eyes. To the great shock of the stepmother and sisters, the prince kneeled before Cinderella and asked for her hand in marriage. Cinderella felt the locket softly shake in her pocket. She smiled and said yes, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Don't you just love a good love story? Okay then, see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello, children. How are you? Today I'm looking forward to a very special story. Are we all snuggled up and ready to call the storybook? Great! Woohoo! All together! Storybook! Ah, here you are. Oh, Snow White. Once upon a time, as the snow fell gently to the ground, a beautiful queen sat sewing at her palace window. She was so enchanted by the wonderful snowfall and the forest beyond that she pricked her finger, and a drop of blood fell onto a rose below. "Ooh, I hope to have a child as white as this snow, as red as this rose, and as black as this window frame," she wished. Soon afterwards, she had a beautiful daughter whose skin was as white as snow, lips as red as the palace rose, and hair as black as the window frame. The queen, who was not well at the time, named the princess Snow White. Everyone loved the little princess, for she was fair and kind. Years later, her father remarried. The new queen was very nice to Snow White and helped everyone at the palace. She even fed the birds and watered the plants. The queen played with Snow White and showed her a magic mirror that could talk. Every time when the queen held the mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror in my hand, who is the fairest of the land?" it replied, "The queen is the fairest of the day." This was how the queen and Snow White spent their time full of fun and laughter. Then one day, Snow White's father, the king, called them both to his throne and said, "Beautiful queen and my little princess, tomorrow morning I will start a long journey to another kingdom. I will be back after a few months. I know that you will be happy together while I am gone." In his absence, to Snow White's surprise, the queen started spending all her time talking to the magic mirror. She stopped feeding the birds and watering the plants. Everyone in the kingdom complained how the queen was becoming meaner and meaner because of all the powers she now had. Snow White felt so bad about it that she fed the birds and watered the plants all by herself. One day, as Snow White was passing by the queen's room, she heard her ask the mirror, "Mirror, mirror in my hand, who is the fairest of the land?" It replied, "The queen was fairest yesterday. Snow White is the fairest now, they say." The queen did not like this answer and went red with rage. She ordered the palace guard to take Snow White right out of her land and into the forest far away, forever. Now, you see, Snow White had always been so kind to the guard that he just could not leave her in the dark forest all alone. So he came up with a great idea. He knew that his friends, the 7 dwarves who lived in the forest, would surely take care of the kind and beautiful princess. He told Snow White about the queen's plan and his great idea, and they both set out to the forest together. By the time they reached the dwarves' cottage, Snow White was very tired. She put all the 7 little beds in the cottage together and fell into a deep sleep across the beds. In the evening, Snow White awoke to quite some noise.
"Oh, heavens! Oh, heavens!" the 7 dwarves were saying. "What a beauty she is!"
Snow White greeted them and told them how the palace guard had brought her there so she could escape the queen's plans. The 7 friends said she could safely stay at the cottage. As the dwarves were worried about the birds and the plants around their cottage, they asked Snow White if she could help them feed the birds and water the plants when they went to work. "Oh, that would be lovely," Snow White squealed with delight. Back at the palace, the queen rushed to ask the mirror, "Mirror, mirror in my hand, who is the fairest of the land?" It replied, "The queen was fairest yesterday. Snow White is the fairest now, they say." This time the queen went green with envy. She started a series of plans to make sure Snow White was not the most beautiful maiden of the land. First, she dressed up as a merchant selling silk ribbons and went in search of Snow White. When she found the cottage, she called out, "Ribbons for sale! Ribbons for sale!" "Oh, I love ribbons," said Snow White as she picked a shiny blue one. The queen tied it so tightly around her waist that Snow White felt woozy. In fact, she felt so dizzy that she sat down and could not move. When the 7 dwarves came back from work, they helped her feel better. One by one, they all warned her not to open the door for anyone ever again. In the meantime, the queen made her way back to the palace and rushed to ask the mirror, "Mirror, mirror in my hand, who is the fairest of the land?" It replied, "The queen was fairest yesterday. Snow White is the fairest now, they say." "Still?" the queen screamed with rage. "This time I will cast a magic spell on her so she cannot be the fairest of anything any more." The queen spent the rest of the day putting magic sleeping potions in some apples. The next day she dressed up as a feeble old fruit seller and took the brightly colored magic apples to the cottage. Now, Snow White knew she should never talk to strangers, But she had such a kind heart that she gave the weak old fruit seller some water. The fruit seller, the queen, handed Snow White a beautiful apple to thank her. As soon as Snow White took a bite, the magic in the apple made her feel weird, and she fell asleep. That evening, when Snow White's 7 friends came home, they could not awaken her at all. The dwarfs tried singing to her and called out in despair, but nothing worked. They wanted to do something special to keep her comfortable, so they built her a beautiful glass bed full of soft pillows. Then the 7 dwarfs took turns guarding Snow White. Every day they gathered around her and cried hopelessly. "Oh, what are we going to do?" they sobbed. Even the birds sang sadly, and the forest grew sad. One morning, as the 7 dwarfs discussed how to help Snow White, their discussions grew so loud that a handsome prince, who happened to ride by, heard them and grew curious. He went closer to see what was happening and was very surprised to see that the red rose in his pocket perfectly matched the color of the sleeping princess's lips. As he laid the beautiful rose next to Snow White, its familiar perfume stirred her dreams and awakened her. Everyone squealed with joy as Snow White smiled gently at the dwarves, the birds, and the handsome prince. The prince told Snow White that he had plucked the rose from a magnificent palace on his way to the forest. Together they rode to find the palace where such beautiful roses grew. And guess what? It was Snow White's old home. As they entered the golden gates of the palace guard greeted them heartily and exclaimed with surprise, "Snow White! Oh, what an absolute delight! Come with me. There is someone you must see." He took her inside the palace, where the king himself sat on a glorious throne. Snow White ran to her father and hugged him tight. Oh, what a sight! "My beautiful daughter, I cannot believe it's you. I was just about to set off to the forest to bring you back," the king said. "You know, the palace guard has told me everything. And the best part is that the queen took off into the forest as soon as she saw me enter the golden gates. She knew how much trouble she was in for being so unfair to you." Snow White and the prince were very happy to hear this. The king thanked the prince and invited him to stay for dinner. As Snow White got ready for the royal feast, she spotted the magic mirror. She held it gently and asked, "Mirror, mirror in my hand, who is the fairest of the land?" And the mirror replied, "You are the fairest of them all." Snow White smiled because she now realized that the magic mirror was praising the beauty of people's actions all along. The end. Oh, thank you, Storybook. Didn't you just love this magical story full of special surprises? And it had a great lesson about being kind, too. I wonder what Storybook will have for us next time. Until then, bye-bye. Hello there, everyone. Are you ready for a story? Wonderful. Oh, Storybook, let's go. Today's story is called How Arthur Was Made King and Won His Kingdom. Once upon a time, there was a very old king who passed away without naming an heir to take over the throne. This meant that the kingdom didn't have a leader to guide the people and keep things running smoothly. There was constant fighting and war over who should be in charge because everyone wanted to be king. There was, however, one person who was respected by all, no matter how much they fought amongst themselves. Merlin, the wise wizard, was older than anyone could remember, with a white beard down to his knees and eyes that shone mysteriously. People had been complaining to him that a king must be chosen and peace restored. One morning, something strange appeared in the town square. It was a great big stone with the sword stuck in it. The bejeweled hilt of the sword shimmered in the sun. Most of the blade was deep in the stone, but what could be seen of it had these words etched on it: "Whoever pulleth this sword out of this stone is the rightful king." The news spread quickly around the kingdom. "Finally," the people said, "we will have a king, and all this fighting can stop." Many people believed themselves to be worthy of ruling the kingdom and wanted to try pulling the sword from the stone. First, a hulking knight in shining armor strutted into the town square. His arm muscles were as big as tree trunks. "This will be easy," he said, and pulled on the sword. It didn't move. Embarrassed, he tried again with both hands, yanking until sweat dripped from his face, but still the sword didn't budge. A lady pushed him away, saying, "Oh, let me try." She grabbed the sword, but it didn't budge. Frustrated, she pulled harder and harder until her hand slipped and she fell backwards right onto her behind. Ouch! And so it went. Person after person tried to draw the sword from the stone, and not even one of them came close to succeeding. Some were angry, some were tired, and some were just plain confused, but they all gave up eventually. There the sword stayed as they continued to live without a king. On New Year's Day, Merlin arranged a big tournament to take place. Every villager joined in the competitions, or at least watched. Among them was Sir Ector and his sons Kay and Arthur. When Arthur was just a tiny baby, Merlin had taken him to Sir Ector, who was known for being a caring father. Merlin asked that he raise Arthur like his own son, promising Sir Ector that one day he would understand why. Sir Ector trusted wise Merlin and loved Arthur just as he did all of his children. As they rode their horses to the tournament, Kay suddenly cried out, "Oh no, I forgot my sword. I can't compete without it. Arthur, would you mind returning home to get it for me?" Arthur, happy to help his big brother, quickly rode back. But when he got home, he found himself locked out of the house because he'd forgotten his key. Oh no! As he passed back through town, he saw the sword in the stone. Since he was just a kid who loved to daydream, he hadn't been paying attention to all the fuss about it. All he knew was that he needed a sword for his brother. And so he jumped off his horse, grabbed the sword, and, easy as can be, pulled it from the stone. Thinking nothing of it, he raced to catch up with his family and gave it to Kay. Kay and Sir Ector could hardly speak when they saw little Arthur with the bejeweled sword. "Where did you get this?" asked Kay. "I found it sticking out of a rock in town," Arthur shrugged. Sir Ector and Kay suddenly bowed down to Arthur, who was confused. "Why are you bowing to me? Is this a joke?" he asked. They told Arthur the news about the sword and what it meant. "You're the new king," Sir Ector said. "Let's tell Merlin at once." Forgetting about the tournament, they rushed to find the wizard in his library. "Merlin, young Arthur is our new king," they cried. Strangely, Merlin was not surprised. He just smiled and stroked his long beard. "But this can't be true," Arthur said. "I'm too young to be a king. Surely among all the people living in the kingdom, there's someone better suited than I." "Arthur, it's time you knew," Merlin answered. "You are actually the son of the old king. When you were a baby, I sent you to Sir Ector, so that no one would know you were heir to the throne and try to harm you. But now you're 16 and ready to take your rightful place as king." Arthur was dumbfounded. But Ector is my father," he said, "and Kay is my big brother." Sir Ector said, "You will always be my son, and Kay will always be your brother. That will never change. But what Merlin says is true. You are related to the late king. The sword in the stone proves it." When the announcement was made that this ordinary boy was to be king, there was a gigantic uproar. "We don't believe this young boy is meant to be king. It's just a trick," they cried. "We demand proof." "Ah, as you wish," Merlin said. Arthur put the sword back into the stone and then pulled it out again easily. However, the people were not convinced and wanted to try again themselves. The same people as last time came forward. Sweating and grunting, they pulled at the sword, but it stuck fast in the stone. When they fell down exhausted, Merlin declared, "Now you can see that Arthur is the rightful king." Arthur approached the stone and again easily removed the sword. A cheer broke out among the crowd. "All hail King Arthur! All hail King Arthur!" However, there were those who didn't think this could be so. "He isn't a mighty fighter like I am," one said. "Look how little he is." "Oh, he isn't as clever as me," said another. "He's too young to be a fair ruler." "He certainly doesn't look royal," said another. "He can't rule the kingdom wearing those rags." Soon the people of the kingdom split into two camps. One felt Arthur should not be king. The other supported Arthur. The battle that erupted between them would go down in history. Using swords, shields, horses, and any weapons they could find, the revolting army launched a vicious attack against Arthur and his supporters. However, Arthur was clever and fair and knew how to outsmart them. His army won the battle, and he turned out to be a smart, strong leader after all. And that is how young Arthur got to be king. Many adventures awaited him after that, but those are stories for another time. The end. Ah, such a classic tale. Oh, I'm so excited to share more stories with you. See you soon.
Oh, I like this story. If you did too, click on the thumbs up. Hello, children. Are you ready to hear a story? Oh, that's wonderful, because I'm ready to tell a story. Oh, and here's the storybook. Everyone's ready. Let us begin. Oh, the story of the Ugly Duckling. Our story begins early one morning. Mama Duck was waddling back from the pond where she loved watching the beautiful sunrise. Mama Duck would have liked to have stayed longer, but she had a nest full of eggs to attend to. As Mama Duck happily made her way back to her nest, she came upon a strange-looking egg. She looked around to see if perhaps the egg's parents were nearby, but no one was there. She waited to see if they'd come for their egg. She waited and waited and waited, but no one came. Well, she couldn't just leave the egg there. Finally, she decided to take the strange egg home and care for it. When she arrived back at the nest, she gently placed the strange egg amongst the others and gave it a little kiss. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "You're safe now." Sometime later, As Mama Duck was sitting upon her eggs, she suddenly felt a little nudge from underneath her. Quack, quack. One of the eggs began to hatch, and then another, and soon the air was filled with the sweet chirpings of baby ducklings. Oh, hello, little ones. Ooh, but one egg didn't hatch. It remained quiet and still. It was the strange egg. What is growing inside it? Mama Duck wondered. A short time later, the strange egg suddenly began to shake. The duck family stood around the egg, eagerly watching its shell fall away. Well, the little something that emerged looked nothing like the other ducklings. It was bigger and rounder, and the colors of its feathers was much different from their own.
Ooh, what is it?
One of the ducklings asked. Why, he's your new brother, Mama Duck replied happily. Well, new brother or not, the ducklings thought he was very strange, and for that matter, ugly. And from then on, that is what they called him, the Ugly Duckling. Well, the word soon spread, and others began noticing the peculiar duckling. One time, a sparrow whistled laughingly down from the treetop. Look, there goes the ugliest duckling in the land. There was another time when a pair of chipmunks stopped to watch the ducklings parade on by when they caught sight of the ugly duckling and burst out laughing.
What an ugly duckling!
Oh, the ugly duckling couldn't understand why he was so different and why everyone laughed at him. It was so painful. And so, late one night, while everyone was sleeping, he quietly snuck away into the dark. The poor little ugly duckling roamed about the countryside, and whenever someone would come around, he'd quickly hide so they wouldn't see him and laugh. Well, time went by, and the seasons changed, but the ugly duckling's pain remained the same. One morning, as they sat beside a little pond enjoying the beautiful sunrise, a flock of geese landed on the pond right beside him. The ugly duckling didn't have time to hide. Hi. The geese all looked at him and smiled. The ugly duckling was puzzled. The geese weren't laughing at him.
Hey, why are you here all alone?
Asked one of the geese. Well, it's a long story, replied the ugly duckling. I guess it's because I'm ugly. The geese looked at each other and all began to laugh. You see, said the ugly duckling, nothing has changed.
Well, perhaps more has changed than you think, said another goose. Take a look in the water and see for yourself.
The ugly duckling slowly waddled to the edge of the water, looked down, and there, looking back at him, was the most beautiful bird he had ever seen. It had snowy white feathers, a long neck, and deep, piercing eyes. Who's that? He called out.
Why, it's you, said the goose. Well, you are a swan.
Huh?
But how could... The ugly duckling was so confused.
He took a deep breath and again looked at his reflection. And there he was, a beautiful swan. I'm a swan. I'm a swan, he sang out, flapping his grand white wings with his head held up high. Sometime later, Mama Duck was sitting and watching a beautiful sunrise when she suddenly heard the flapping of wings, and beside her landed the most beautiful
bird. "Hello," said the swan. "Do you recognize me?"
Mama Duck had never seen the swan before,
But somehow he did seem familiar. She looked deep into his eyes and caught a glimpse of her long lost duckling. "Oh, my, how you've grown. Oh, welcome home, dear one. Welcome home." Mama Duck wrapped her wing around the beautiful swan, and they sat quietly together, enjoying the dawning of a new day. The end. Oh, what a moving story. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.
you know, if you click on the like and subscribe buttons, you'll never miss a story.